I have a button where I can end the live video. So I'm definitely.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Bowe. I'm with the Louisiana State Bar Association, and welcome to our Law Talks virtual workshop series. Today's Law Talks is on types of adoption, and we have attorney Camille Patti with us presenting on these important topics. Camille, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Before we get started, I do need to go over a few important reminders. First, this presentation is being live streamed. Questions will be taken at the end if time permits and answered live. If you are watching this at a library, you may walk up to the computer to ask or submit your question to library staff. If you are watching via Zoom, please use the Q&A section in the Zoom. And if you're watching live on Facebook, please submit your question in the comments section. Please remember, though, that all the comments are public and visible during and after the presentation. And finally, please keep your questions general and not case specific. The attorney can provide information about the law and legal process, but cannot give advice on individual cases. Also, please note that the information, would you mind going to the next slide? I'm sorry. Please note the information provided in this presentation does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials are for general informational purposes only. No viewer of this video should act or refrain from acting based on the information provided in this presentation without first seeking legal advice from counsel in your relevant jurisdiction. If you need assistance finding legal help in Louisiana, please go to the Civil Legal Navigator, which we will refer you to later on in this presentation. Also, the Louisiana State Bar Association's inclusion of a program is not deemed a statement or an endorsement of the views expressed therein by the LSBA or any member of the LSBA. Speaker on LSBA programs were carefully selected for their knowledge, but neither the LSBA nor the speaker warrant that the presentation or materials were free of errors or will continue to be accurate. Statements in these presentations and their materials should be verified before relying on them. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the LSBA, its sections, or committees. Views expressed are those of the authors and contributors only. And next, as I mentioned, our presenter today is Camille Patti. Camille, if you want to go to the next slide. She's an attorney who has a lot of experience with divorce and family law issues. And so I'm going to turn it over to Camille to walk us through these different types of adoption.
Cool. Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everybody. I have no idea how many of y'all there are out there, but hello to everyone. As Stephanie said, I'm Camille Patti. I own a practice in New Orleans that focuses on family law, which is divorce and custody and support, and also adoption. And we do some estates and successions as well, which I think are kind of a natural outcrop of family law. If you would like to contact me after this presentation, please feel free. That's my contact information. If you go to the website, which is the first link up there, all of my other contact information is on there as well as a contact form. All right, so let's get started. Adoption in Louisiana. So this is definitely intended to be kind of a broad overview. Adoption, unfortunately, is not something that a non-attorney is going to be able to do themselves. You really, without exception, are going to need an attorney to help you with this. And at the end of this presentation, we'll talk about some low cost and affordable options that you might be able to access. But it's definitely a complex area of the law with a lot of regulations. And even as an attorney, I'm frequently going back and checking the statutes just to make sure that I'm remembering it correctly and it hasn't changed since the last time I looked at it. All right, so we have here an iconic duo. It's Larry Moe and Curly. I don't know how old, I don't know who you are, and I don't know how old you are. So I don't know if people remember the Three Stooges anymore. It's not like I'm that old. But I thought that it was appropriate because there are also three main types of adoption when we are talking about adoption. So there's private adoption, I'm trying to move my. Okay, well, hopefully you can see the children's code articles that it is in. I can't because my face is covering it right now. There's private adoption, there's agency adoption, and there's intrafamily adoption. And all three types of those are found in the children's code, which means that adoption is going to be brought in juvenile court. So in Louisiana, juvenile court records are sealed. It's closed to the public. It's not an open record. That often means that juvenile courts have a slightly unique way of proceeding because there is not a lot of, I don't want to say accountability, but there's not a lot of visibility to the outside. So in Louisiana, across all of the jurisdictions, even in civil court and criminal court, you are going to have variations where judges and courts like things to be done in a specific way. And that also holds very true for juvenile court. And in addition, you can't access the records even as an attorney for a party. You have to be enrolled in the case and have the court actually provide you with copies. There's no way to remotely access these. So all three of these, because they're in the children's code, it's probably not surprising to you that these are all for adoptions of children. They all involve terminating one or both biological parents' rights before the child is ready for adoption. With adoption in general, if a child is adopted, then they are able to, first of all, they're considered to be the child of whoever adopted them as if they were born of that couple. A new birth certificate is issued. The original one is placed under seal. Relatively recently, they made it possible where adopted children are able to access their original birth certificate. I'm not super familiar with the requirements, but I do know that it is possible in some circumstances for when a child becomes an adult, if they are interested to find maybe their biological parent, that they can access that original birth certificate. But while they are a child, the birth certificate that is issued is going to list the adoptive parents as their mother and father on the birth certificate. And they have all of the benefits that a child naturally has. So they become the heirs of their adopted parents, which means that if the adoptive parent were to die without a will, then the adopted child, or I mean, you could just say the child, is going to inherit from their parent. They also retain the ability to inherit from their biological parents as well. I think that comes up in relatively limited circumstances, but it is definitely something that does come up. Biological parents, however, do not have the right to inherit from children who were biologically theirs but were adopted by somebody else. But adoptive parents have the right to inherit from adopted children. So the nuts and bolts of these three types of adoptions are going to be kind of similar in that you're filing it in children and juvenile court, and you have to have a petition that's filed, and then you're going to ultimately get a final judgment of adoption. So there's one more type that I'm going to briefly talk about. I just think it's kind of fun. Louisiana is special, and Louisiana is special for a lot of reasons. I think we all know that. We all live here. We have the Civil Code, which is the heritage of our Napoleonic French heritage. So that's unique among the other 49 states. And also something that is unique. So imagine if Larry, Curly, and Moe had a fourth weird sibling who wasn't quite the same. Adult adoption. Adult adoption is found in the Louisiana Civil Code. It's in the Civil Code and not the Children's Code, which means that actions for adult adoption are brought in civil court. previously, for adult adoption, you just had to get some consenting adults together to execute authentic acts of adoption. So basically, you would have individual A who says, yes, I want to adopt this other adult as my child, and we are going to execute this affidavit saying, I'm adopting him or her. And it has to be an authentic form, which means it was executed in front of a notary and two witnesses. And then the adoptee would execute the same authentic act. And that was all you needed in order to accomplish an adult adoption. That was problematic because you're conferring rights to inheritance. There's an issue if these people have the capacity to be able to consent to an adoption. Possibly someone is finding a vulnerable older person and convincing them to do this. I have heard it also is kind of coming up in the context of immigration, where people would maybe be doing an adult adoption in order to get that then citizenship rights that traditionally and usually under the Constitution would confer on the descendants of US citizens. So now the way the adult adoption works is you still just have to have these people do authentic acts, but you have to also file a petition in civil court for the parish where the adoptive parent is located, and the court has to hold a hearing just to make sure that it's in everybody's best interest to actually sign off on this adoption. They're not going to look at it super close, but they want to make sure that everybody has the capacity, everybody understands the ramifications and has some basis for wanting to do this. But once you get a final judgment of adoption in an adult adoption case, it's the same thing where you can submit the judgment to Vital Records and they should amend the birth certificate to list the adoptive parent as the parent on the birth certificate. All right, so the bulk of this is going to focus on the three main types of, or the three ways of adopting children in Louisiana, because I think that that is oftentimes what people think of when they are thinking of adoption. Okay. Here are the basic requirements to adopt a child in Louisiana. I chose this background because the first requirement is basically just like be an adult person. You can be either a single person who is adopting a child, or you can be a married couple adopting a child. You, however, cannot be an unmarried couple who is adopting a child. I'm not going to read too much into what the legislature is thinking when they're not allowing an unmarried couple to adopt a child together, but I will say that I have seen it be an issue in the context. It's currently an issue for some of my clients who have adopted a child in another state, because generally they're an unmarried couple who have legally adopted a child who was born in Louisiana, and they adopted them in another state that allows unmarried couples to adopt children. And usually when you have an adoption that goes through in another state, that clerk of court is supposed to send it to Vital Records in Louisiana, and Louisiana is supposed to just issue the new birth certificate. It's not supposed to require any further steps. But because these people are unmarried, Vital Records is refusing to issue an amended birth certificate because they're saying that it's contrary to Louisiana law. There was a federal case in, I believe, 2012, where an unmarried, a very similar fact scenario where an unmarried couple adopted a child born in Louisiana, and I think in that case it was in New York State, and Vital Records refused to issue it. And that was decided at district court level, and it went on appeal, and then it was reheard en banc, which means the entire Fifth Circuit reheard that case and said, ultimately, this is a state issue. There are procedures in state court that should be sufficient to have vital records issue this birth certificate, and you didn't try to do it in state court first. So you have to exhaust your remedies in state court before you can deal with it. And as far as I'm aware, there was no further procedure on that. So it's still kind of an open question as to whether or not we're going to be able to get a new birth certificate. I think that there are a lot of issues with not issuing a new birth certificate, because the whole thing with an adoption is that the biological parent, their rights are terminated and they are supposed to no longer be on the birth certificate. There's not supposed to be a record of them and their relationship to the child. So we'll see how that goes. But currently in Louisiana, if you are adopting, you can either do it as a single person or you can do it as an unmarried or as a married couple. You have to be over the age of 18. You have to be a United States citizen or a resident alien. And then, so for private adoption and agency adoption, home studies are required in order to make sure that you're basically a fit person who is capable of adequately providing for the emotional and physical material needs of a child. In the case of interfamily adoption, they don't have to do the whole home study, but they do have to run background checks in every state where the adoptive parent has resided since turning 18 in order to ensure that they have never been convicted of any, basically, crimes against a child. I think the reasons that you would want that are pretty obvious. All right, so we're going to start with agency adoption. So I think Modern Family is a pretty popular show, but in case anybody hasn't actually seen it, this is a couple from the show, Cam and Marshall. Let me know if I got that wrong. Anyway, this is their daughter, Lily, who they adopted. I am not sure if the show gets into it, but the only way that they accomplished this adoption was through an agency adoption. I'm pretty sure that Lily was international, and so unless something is being done illegally, an international adoption is always going to be an agency adoption. There are lots of international laws in order to ensure that people are doing it correctly and that they aren't. I mean, I saw a story today about, it wasn't American citizens, but it was a woman in South America who had her children taken illegally and adopted to somewhere in Italy. And that was a long time ago. And the laws are basically designed to hopefully ensure that parents are knowingly and voluntarily giving up their children, and that they are going to the safe and stable families. I'm not an expert in any means in international adoption. Agency adoption, in my experience, is also, I don't come across it as much as the other two. And I think that there are reasons for that we're going to get into. Okay, so I think that agency adoption is often the type of adoption that people think of when they think of adoption, where you decide with your partner or by yourself that you want to adopt a child, and so you contact an adoption agency who helps you secure a placement of a child, oftentimes an infant, but not always. Agency adoption can apply to private adoption agencies, but it also, if you adopt a child who has been placed in the care of the state, that is also an agency adoption. The Department of Children and Family Services, that's DCFS, that would be qualified as an agency adoption as well. So for an agency adoption, there's a lot of front end work where a potential adoption adoptive parent is doing the work to get certified as an adoptive parent before a child would even be placed with them, which includes having a home study, doing a background check, and usually paying a significant amount of money to the adoption agency as well. So I think the major pro that I see of an agency adoption is that you're really going to have a lot of hand-holding and guidance through this process because you're working with professionals every step of the way. In addition to working with the adoption agency, once a placement is secured, usually you're going to retain an attorney who's in the location where the child is going to be born or transferred from in order to draft the legal paperwork, in order to ensure that when the child is born, there are a lot of steps. The parents have to terminate their parental rights and usually a temporary order giving you temporary legal custody is ordered preliminary to a final judgment of adoption. And particularly if you are transferring a child from out of state or out of the country, you have to make sure that all of these steps are going to be followed before you're actually allowed to take the child. And then the cons, as I have listed here, are that because you are paying all of these professionals, it's very expensive. And I think that there is a higher degree of uncertainty in when the placement is actually going to happen because it's dependent on locating a birth mother or couple who has decided to give up the child for adoption. A lot of times the child has not been born yet. They have rights to change their mind. And so even if you think that you have secured a placement, it might fall through. I mean, if you're going where you're adopting from a state agency like DCFS, a lot of times you would be fostering a child prior to being allowed to adopt them. And so there the unknowns as to whether or not the biological parent is going to be able to regain custody of the child or their rights are going to ultimately be terminated. Okay, so moving on. Okay, private adoption. I had fun designing this PowerPoint. And again, I think that this is a pretty well-known TV show. I mean, one of the most well-known TV shows ever. But this is not actually an example of private adoption. When I was first putting this together, I was like, oh, this is perfect because Phoebe knows her brother. If you're not familiar with the show, Phoebe agrees to have children for her brother and his wife. And then I thought about it more and I was like, that's not private adoption, that's surrogacy. So I left it in because I want to just touch on surrogacy briefly. I think it's more in the public consciousness because all of these celebrities keep having babies via surrogate. And I do have people reach out to me who are interested in having a baby via surrogate. And what I tell them and what I'm going to tell you is that in Louisiana, surrogacy just really isn't a thing. Funnily enough, Phoebe's situation would actually be allowed in Louisiana because she's growing these kids for a married couple and she's not receiving compensation for it. That is a big sticking point where Louisiana does not allow surrogacy for compensation. So there are very few people who are willing to go through the process. I have had a child, it's a lot of growing a human in order to give it to somebody else who aren't seeking some sort of financial compensation for that. And in fact, I can't, this is not a view of the Bar Association, this is a personal view only. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect some sort of compensation for that. Louisiana law doesn't currently allow that. If you are interested in surrogacy, you would have to look to another state in order to do that. So Phoebe's situation does not apply. I feel like fewer people have probably seen this movie. It was a little bit more of an indie movie that came out in the 2000s. So Juno is a movie where Juno, the lead character, gets pregnant at 16, and she finds a couple to adopt her child through an ad in the local penny saver. And that is an example of a private adoption. So private adoption is between people who know each other. It is basically private parties. One person is pregnant, the other person says, hey, I'll adopt your baby. And they do that between themselves. The way that the children's code lays out, excuse me, like I said, I have a child. It's the beginning of school, so I'm sick because he can't cover his mouth properly. So the legislature, the way that the Children's Code lays out private adoption is very similar to the way that agency adoption is laid out, where it's kind of anticipating that people are going to do all of the legal paperwork before this kid is born or before this kid is transferred. And my experience with it is that it actually doesn't play out like that a lot of the times. I have encountered, I'm trying to think, I kind of feel like all of the private adoptions I have encountered is a scenario where you had the meeting of the minds, you had the private people, you had the woman who was pregnant, and you had the person or couple who said, I will raise your baby for you. I want to adopt them. But they already did that. And then this child has been living with the adoptive parents, usually since birth. And then they like get around to saying, I want to finalize this adoption. So there is a lot of, actually, let me start that sentence again. So there are other ways to do it legally where these people have accomplished what they're doing. So at birth, they, by some means, transferred legal custody of the child to the adoptive parents. And so the adoptive parents were able to seek services and get the child the care that they needed to do. They would even be able to enroll the child in school. But at some point, if you're doing this adoption, you want to terminate the parental rights, and that's usually when they come to me. So when I say that it's similar to agency adoption, something that I haven't really talked about, although I have mentioned it, is how you terminate parental rights and the requirements for doing that. So there's the authentic act of consent, which is what I was talking about for adult adoption. That's also what you do for a child. The biological parents need to consent in an authentic act to this. However, for a biological mother to terminate their parental rights, they're required to undergo a minimum of 2 counseling sessions before they can do that. There is no requirement for the biological father to do this. I don't know how that is constitutional because it seems like a discrimination on the basis of sex. I don't think that that's been adjudicated. That is just what the law says, and that's just me offering my editorial opinion where I don't know what the grounds is for saying that it's harder necessarily for a woman to give up their child than it is for a man. But that is what it is. The man can just sign the paperwork, the woman cannot. In Louisiana, biological parents are not allowed to terminate their parental rights unless there is another person who is willing to accept those rights. It's not like that in every single state. I have a sister-in-law who her child's father terminated, with her consent, his parental rights before their daughter was even born. They live in Colorado. So in Louisiana, though, we're not letting you off the hook unless somebody else is willing to be on the hook. And the public policy for that is even if you are a deadbeat parent and you don't see your kid, you still have support obligations. And if the state can find you, they're going to put you on child support. And so why are they going to give that up if there's not anyone else to take that responsibility over? There are also ways to involuntarily terminate parental rights. So in the Children's Code, which it's a juvenile proceeding. So a lot of the Children's Code is going to be Department of Children's and Family Services, where you have abuse or neglect in like those foster care situations where the biological parents are really not doing a great job. And there are a number of reasons with varying degrees of not good why you could involuntarily terminate a parent's rights. I was actually just looking at that statute today, and it was changed in 2023, which is before the last time or after the last time I looked at it, because it used to specify that a private attorney could employ one, which was the child has been left in the care of another person by the parent, and then the parent has not seen or spoken, has not seen the child in more than 6 months and has not provided support for the child in more than 6 months. It's now changed where it's not, they don't really appear to reference the private attorneys anyway, anywhere in it. So my assumption is that I think that a private party adopting a child could potentially assert any of those grounds in order to try to involuntarily terminate a parent's rights. But I honestly don't know the context in which that would come up. I think that it's still very likely that you're going to use that specific one about this parent gave me their child and they haven't seen them in more than 6 months, and I don't know where they are, and they haven't been providing any support, and I've been the primary parent, so you, court, should terminate their parental rights and let me adopt this child. If a party cannot be found, so in petitions for adoption, the biological parents need to be named. And if you don't know where they are, then you have to appoint an attorney to represent their interests in their absence, which usually means the attorney doing a diligent search in order to try to find them. And the way that the involuntary statute is written is kind of like, if you don't know where they are and you haven't been able to find them, and this attorney hasn't been able to find them, we're going to terminate their rights. Sometimes there's an issue where people say that they don't know who the biological father is, and the biological father is not named on the birth certificate. I do my due diligence and really try to get people to give me an idea of, okay, but do you know who it is? Do you have an idea of who it could be? Because you really want, I mean, if it were me, I was out there and I didn't know. I'm a woman, so like I'm gonna know if I had a kid or not. But if I were a man, maybe I would want to know if I had a kid, and maybe I would want to raise them, and maybe I would be a good parent, and nobody just told me that. So you have to at least give them the opportunity. But if it's really unclear who the biological father is, there are steps that you have to follow. You have to appoint a curator. You have to get a letter from the putative father registry, which is a list. I kind of want to do an open records request to find out how many putative fathers are recorded in the putative father registry, and is it 0? Because I just don't think that people are signing up for that. But you do have to get a letter from the putative father registry saying, no, there's nobody registered as the putative father for this child, if you're saying we don't know who the biological father is. The only exception to really needing to do a due diligence search for the putative father is if a sperm donor was used, because sperm donors do not have parental rights, so you don't need to terminate them. Okay, I talked about missing parties. Okay, which brings us to intrafamily adoption. If you go watch the Olympics, I mean, this is how I found out about it. If you watch the Olympics, you are probably aware that Simone Biles was adopted by her grandfather and her step-grandmother when she was a child. So they're now her mom and dad. So that's an example, that's a great example of intrafamily adoption. So for intrafamily adoption, it's biological and non-biological family members who can petition the court to adopt a child. So a non-biological family member would be a step parent. In Simone's case, it was her step grandmother, but I see step parent adoptions. Oftentimes it's a case where a biological dad has not been super great. He hasn't been coming around. He hasn't been paying his child support. He's got a lot of child support arrearages. Mom has moved on and remarried somebody else who has actually taken on that parental role in their child's life. And so they say, you know what, bio dad, you can, in this case, let go, relinquish your parental rights, and stepdad is going to step in and actually be legally the father of this child now. When I was reviewing for this presentation, it's always good to go back and look at the law itself. They qualify collaterals to the 12th degree as an intrafamily adoption. And so what that means is really distant relatives can still follow this intrafamily adoption procedure. A 12th degree relative, I honestly have not done the math of how you would get there, but it's like way beyond aunts and uncles and first cousins. You're getting out there, because so every degree is like your mom is your first degree, your child is your first degree, grandparents are second degree. I think maybe aunts and uncles are third degree, cousins are first cousins are fourth degree. So like, I again would like to know how they came up with 12th degree and how often someone with that attenuated a connection to this child is stepping up to say, I'm going to adopt this child. So for an intrafamily adoption, the petitioning person needs to have had legal or physical custody of the child for at least 6 months preceding the adoption. So it's not a tailored fit, but a lot of times with same-sex couples where one party is biologically related to the child. So if it's a same-sex female couple and one woman gives birth to the child, they'll add the other woman in the father designation on the birth certificate, but they'll do the additional step to protect that second parent's rights. So we refer to it as the second parent adoption. They will actually do an intrafamily adoption so that they also have a judgment of adoption decreeing that that child is the child of the second parent. And that falls under the intrafamily adoption statute. The only jurisdiction in Louisiana where you can't currently do that is the Fourth Circuit, because they decided that that wasn't kosher, but you can always file in the parish where Vital Records is located, which is Orleans. And currently Orleans does allow to do second parent intrafamily adoptions. And like, oops, let me go back. As we said with where the home study versus the background checks, the court gives these types of adoption less scrutiny because the child has already been in their care, and usually only, in my experience, because I do a lot of the second parent adoptions, only one parent is terminating their rights at most. In a step-parent adoption, it's only the mom or the dad who is terminating their rights, and the other mom or dad is still in the home with the child and caring for the child. And so I think that it's seen as less risk, but they do still do the due diligence to make sure that there haven't been any criminal convictions for child abuse or neglect. Okay. How long will this take? I chose the snail. It will probably be for obvious reasons. Though I would use it for the legal system in general. I am constantly trying to manage my clients' expectations of how long things will take. Whatever your expectations are, double them and then double them again. At worst, you will be pleasantly surprised that it did not take as long as you thought it would. Okay, so in the short term, 1 to 6 weeks, that would be an ideal time to start reaching out to agencies or attorneys if you already have an idea that this is something you want to do, but you haven't identified a child and you're going to need an agency to help place a child with you. It's great to start collecting documents for an intrafamily adoption. You're going to need with like a step parent adoption or a second parent adoption, you need the child's birth certificate, you need a marriage license, you need documentation in order to show the court that these allegations, these things that you're saying in your petition are actually true. You can also start working towards getting pre-certified to have an adoptive placement. Medium term. So if you've already had custody for 6 months and you have all of your documents, you could file your petition. Then you would need to serve the necessary parties. So you would serve the biological mom and dad, or try to and see if you can. And then if you can't, you can file to appoint an attorney, a curator to represent their interests. And then if you've already filed within that time frame, you can submit your information to get a background checks. With intrafamily adoptions, it is not uncommon to have your judgment of adoption within 6 months, although no promises. Okay, and then the long term, again, my face is covering this, so I can't really see. 6 months until forever. The more complicated cases where it's contested, or you're dealing with involuntary terminations, or you're dealing with the agency adoptions, whether it be a state or a private, those can go on for years. I can't see the first bullet point. Hopefully you can. Okay, and then just a note, the wheels of justice turn slow. Again, I cannot emphasize how slow this will go. And better to be pleasantly surprised than disappointed and surprised that it's taken so long. So I think that is all I have, and we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat now. So just a reminder, if you are joining by Zoom, please put them into the Q&A section in the Zoom. And then if you're watching on Facebook, please put those into the comments section. Camille, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. While we wait for these questions to come in, I want to highlight a couple of additional resources. These might be helpful if you have a legal question that wasn't addressed today, or if you're watching this presentation later and you didn't get a chance to ask your question. Also, if you just need help finding or getting assistance from an attorney, or getting more information on these issues or any other issues, you can go to the Louisiana State Bar Association's Find Legal Help page. So this is a flyer for our Find Legal Help page, where you can access basically a continuum of services. It includes our attorney directory, the civil legal navigator, legal and pro bono organizations, a modest means directory, self-help services, and more. I would like to call special attention to the Louisiana Civil Legal Navigator. This is a great sort of diagnostic tool that helps you identify your legal issue, and it provides customized information, referrals to legal aid, and other low cost and free services. It is free to use. It's open to anyone that wants to use it. So feel free to go check that out if you want to find some more information or need help. And then you can also access, the second arrow is pointing to our free legal answers program. This is an online program that allows users to log in whenever and wherever they like and ask their civil legal questions, and then have pro bono attorneys answer those questions through the website. It is private and it acts almost like an email exchange between the user and the attorney that's answering the question. But please do note that users must meet certain income guidelines to use this program. When you access it, it will, and you go to set up kind of your account, it will ask those questions, and so you'll know that pretty early on. But feel free. We also have a newly added disability assistance network. I know I didn't point that out, but it is fairly new, added to this page, and it essentially will connect you with attorneys that will take cases related to disability law. They do charge, they're not free, but you can search by area, like by parish or by topic. And that's, like I said, for disability related issues. So with that being said, we're going to take a check to see if any questions have been asked real quick, and we'll just pause a few minutes to give folks time to type them in if they have any. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So with that, Camille, if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, wait. Here's one. Is there a way for grandparents to share custody with parents?
Yeah, so that's more of a custody situation. But so custody is filed generally in civil court. There is a proceeding in juvenile court. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Custody is actually something that there are forms for in all of the courthouses across the state that handle civil matters. So you can actually go to court and fill out paperwork yourself to do a shared custody arrangement where a grandparent would be able to make some decisions for a child. But there's no limitation on who can have custody as long as people are consenting to it. If the parents are not consenting, then you have to do a hearing, and the court considers factors in order to determine what is in a child's best interest. But if there is just a situation where, by the agreement of the parties, the grandparents are going to have some custodial rights, which custody is either it's both legal custody, which is the legal designation of joint or sole, and physical custody, which is actually the visitation schedule. So if there is a legal and physical custody schedule arrangement that works for everybody and you want that legal paperwork, then that is something you can do, but it's separate from adoption.
And just to your point, since you mentioned the court forms, on this Find Legal Help page, there is a self-help services section where and legal forms, and there are court forms related to custody. I believe there's a petition for custody that's on there. But generally, when it comes to the court forms, and I think what Camille mentioned was that there are 4 situations where there is consent. The the more, if it is, you know, contested and consent isn't given, the more contentious or, you know, disagreement there is, the more likelihood there, you know, that you should seek representation from an attorney that can help you sort through those issues. But if it's uncontested and it's a simple matter, then you might want to try using one of the court forms, and you can visit that part of the website. We'll give it another second for other questions. Camille, if you want to go to the next slide, I can go ahead and go over our save the date for the next law talk. So the next law talk will be on bankruptcy on October 20th from noon to 1 p.m. This will be during our Lawyers and Libraries Week, and during that week we'll be hosting these law talks once every day, Monday through Friday, all starting at noon. So they'll be covering different topics, but there will be one on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. You can go to our Lawyers and Libraries website, which is linked here on this slide, if you want to look at and register for any of those other law talks. I'm doing one last check, and I do not see any other questions that came through. So Camille, thank you so very much. This was really great and really helpful, and I appreciate you giving this presentation for us today. And that concludes the Law Talks for today. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon or great evening, I guess, at this point. And we'll see you all on the 20th.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.